You have a man embracing a woman on the cover and you say parental unit. People are going to open that up. They want to know what's going on. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Irenicast, the weekly podcast dedicated to conversations on faith and culture. We are your hosts. I'm Jeff.
What's up? I'm Mona.
And I am Alan.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. This week, we are going to be talking about humility. More specifically, what is humility and is it an antiquated notion? And then after our conversation, we are going to introduce a new segment called Title Me This. So, humility. This is an interesting topic, and we had some conversations off air about how to frame this particular thing, and this is kind of motivated, not solely, but mostly from Alan, as far as like his experience and some of the stuff he wanted to talk about. So, Alan, why don't you go ahead and frame this conversation for us?
Sure. I think we should start out by defining humility before we talk about whether it's something that's antiquated or something we should pursue, or if it has any relevance. Because I think humility means something different to different people. And I know in my own life, humility has had sort of an evolving meaning for me. I look back at some of the ways I looked at humility growing up, and I see them now as very detrimental, very unhealthy, and there's sort of a progression out of that. Jeff, you and I talked a lot in the past about spirituality and about ethics, and it always, correct me if I'm wrong, but it always came back down to pride and humility for me. Would you say that that's...
Oh, yeah, all the time. Even when we weren't talking about that, it came down to pride and humility for you.
Really? Wait, how?
Well, just because, okay, I'll tell you why, and then maybe we can tell you how. So the why is I had a youth group experience where we were told constantly that the main and only sin in the world is pride, like pride over and against what God wants you to do for your life, pride over and against other people. Like, don't think too highly of yourself, stuff like that. And so that constant rhetoric was in the background of sort of everything we did. And then for someone like me, I mean, for some people, that's maybe a good thing to hear, that they need to check their pride or try not to be too selfish or something like that. But for someone who already struggled with codependency is probably the best way to describe how I sort of grew up. Someone who struggled with that, hearing pride and humility sort of retooled my view of the whole world. So everything I did was either motivated by selfishness and pride or serving other people. And that's basically why everything came down to that for me. So Jeff and I would be talking in conversation, and I'd be like, oh, that's just because you or someone else is prideful, or, oh, that's just because of, my pride. And you've seen this before, right? People, Christians or someone who's spiritual will speak in the public sphere or on Facebook or wherever, and they will detract from what they're saying or be like self-detrimental for all of their comments. Have you ever seen that before? People,
oh, definitely.
Yeah, that was me to a T. And I remember in college, in homeless ministry, there was this guy that was kind of showing me the ropes on, basically would go down and feed people in Skid Row. And he was a really good friend, and he told me, he saw what I was struggling with, and he said, Alan, humility is not high thoughts of yourself. It's not low thoughts of yourself. It's no thoughts of yourself. And that really helped me think, like, not have these low thoughts of myself that like pushed myself down. But now looking back at that was just sort of a stepping stone to where I am now. I don't think humility is no thoughts of self. I think humility for me now is right thoughts of who I am.
Oh. Well, if your definition was still no thoughts of yourself, that would have made much more interesting conversation between the three of us.
It would have, right?
Because that's pretty much
I would have
bullcrap.
tried to tear that
is,
apart.
But I will tell you, it's less bullcrap than where I was at. Because where I was at was in a place of constantly telling myself that I am worth like less. I am humility in the sense of I'm not choosing to be humble or choosing to live into a humble life. I am worth like less than I think I am, sort of thing. And so I've moved away from that, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit. But humility has been used in the past by people to keep people down, to hurt people, and I've seen that personally. But I still believe that humility, when it's done right, is very important, and the consequences of not embracing humility as a society or as people are far-reaching, and all I have to do is point to what's happening right now in the political debates, where someone can talk about their penis size and be completely legitimate. Because
oh, good Lord. No,
that's okay.
Legitimate.
Well, okay. So
No,
what
there's
what
so
is
many things.
humility?
What is humility, though?
Wait.
What is humility?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm about to like take your nice like red balloon and like pop it with a pin.
That's not
Christian?
paternalistic at all.
That's,
Hey, Alan, I'm going to take your balloon. I'm going to make you drop an
that's
ice
a
cream.
creepy voice. I'm not being
Well,
creepy.
what you said's a little creepy.
Come on, be a contender, man. Listen, here's my question. It's not menacing. It's just a normal question. Why do you have to have a word for it and call it humility when actually you're just describing being completely truthful?
Because I think it's more than just being truthful. So yeah, that's a good question. It's more than being truthful for me. I define humility in relation to others. I kind of know what humility is. I don't have a neat one sentence definition, but I have examples of what I know as humility. I mean, my father growing up drove when we were in high school, all three of us boys, we drove cars to school and to work. And my dad always opted for the car that wasn't the best. Even though he was the one bringing the money in, even though he had total need for the best car, he would make decisions where he would put the interests of other people above his own. And that like recalls Philippians 2 for me when Paul talks about imitating Christ. He says, doing things in humility means taking other people's interests and regarding them as much or higher than your own. So looking out for other people, empathy is a big part of humility for me. But humility is also like recognizing that some of the best things in my life are things that I haven't worked for. And I don't know if everyone can say this because we're not all in the same social locations, but one view of life is that I have earned and I've achieved and I've gotten to a place where I am entitled to certain things and I'm better than other people because of what I've done. Humility is recognizing that life is grace and that some of the best things about life and some of the best things that I have were given to me, not things that I earned. So Jeff said off air, he was going to talk about humility being something you are. I think that's super interesting because all of my definitions of humility are kind of relative to other people and they're situational. And maybe that's because humility is something that you are and not something that you always do.
And that's my problem with this, like defining what humility is, because the example that you give, and again, when I say this, I'm not making any judgments on your dad, obviously. Mm-hmm. But the example you give of your dad giving up, the best cars to you and your brothers and him taking the, the least whatever. On the surface, you can attribute that to humility. But if the reason that he's doing it is because he's constantly scared of disappointing the people around him, and like you can't take an outward manifestation of something and then completely define it to what you would say this is humility, because then you create this atmosphere of false humility that becomes more control than anything else. So I think that's why I say humility has much more to do with who you are. I think it's just more of a self-awareness than anything else.
I think that's a fair argument.
I would say that it's impossible to know what motivates. This is funny. My whole life, whenever I've chosen to do something that's good, there's always somebody who will question your motives, my motives. This is just what I've found. And I think that if I look at like my dad's life, and I know you're saying it's not a criticism of him, it's impossible to know what motivates the actions that someone else has unless you really, I don't know, get to know them and explore those things.
You can't know that. That's the thing. It's more like an internal conversation with yourself.
But seeing a pattern of somebody, who's willing to defend other people, or like, I don't know how to say it other than like take the hit for other people. Say you're working on a team and someone has to suffer consequences, you'd be willing to do it, or you do something for somebody without like them even knowing. Basically taking interests of other people and looking at the world through their eyes and doing things that place their interests at a higher level in your life than they normally would be, I think is beginning to embrace a humble life. And that comes seriously from Philippians 2. Like,
but the normally would be as problematic in that. The normally would be because some of us are socialized to not consider other people, and some of us are socialized to consider other people too much. So
that's why I think it's a relative. That's why I think it's a relative definition.
Honestly, the word humility.
It's a relative. Hold on. It's a relative definition in Philippians 2 anyway, saying like talking about your interests and other people's interests. Like even even setting that kind of definition of humility out necessarily makes it a relative definition. So it's going to be different for different people.
Well, what's the benefit at all of even defining humility for anyone other than yourself?
That's true. Something I've discovered in ministry is that some of the insights I have about spirituality and life and ethics are amazing things when you embrace them for yourself, but when you force them on other people can be horrible. For instance, God being good or things working out in the end or whatever is a wonderful thing if you're suffering, but when you force it on somebody else, it's very oppressive. So I wouldn't say to somebody that they just need to be humble or that I have the right to judge them and where their heart is at. But I think as a whole, as human beings, holding up this notion of humility is not antiquated. It actually protects us from some of the more unfortunate aspects of our society. The problem is when we say certain people need to be humble instead of embracing it on the whole.
I don't know.
The problem is...
I disagree.
The problem is defining humility as like taking away someone's agency or giving your agency up. Humility can't ever be something that holds you down. It's not deprecation or self-abnegation. It's self-giving. That's what it has to be seen as, because if you go the other way, then it's no longer humility and it's something that's pretty bad.
Yeah, so. Again, I'm still struggling to see why it's relevant today, because yes, we do need to have an answer or maybe a value or a virtue culturally or religiously for people who take up way too much space in the world and are raving narcissists, right?
More than
and
that,
don't consider
I'm going to pop your red balloon. All right, I'm going to take it. I'm going to pull a needle in it. There is a show. I don't want to ruin it for everybody. No spoilers. There's a show on criminal justice that's out right now on Netflix. One of the episodes is titled "A Profound Lack of Humility." And when you have a jury of people that convict somebody who has been accused of a crime, they're innocent until proven guilty. It is a lack of humility to look at that situation and think, I've got it all figured out. I know what is right. I know they're guilty. Instead of taking the humble approach that would say, I know I'm limited. I know the facts are limited. I know this person's innocent until proven guilty, and I'm going to be aware of all of those things when I make my decisions or my judgments. And so when we don't embrace humility, we can destroy other people's lives forever because we don't recognize our limitations.
Well, no, I think that's fair. I think the word for me is so tarnished. The word humility,
Baggage.
like it makes me cringe. It does. Like I've been told to be humble my whole life, and for me that means like I'll tell a story about this in a sec, but like for me that has meant like be insecure. I have no problem recognizing that we should name our limitations and be very circumspect and own those things. But I think for me the word humility doesn't connote that. It connotes, like when I think of humility, I think of oppression. I think of all the people who have been I know you said that's not supposed to be that, but for me, the word still has that connotation. It's all the people who've, either come from humble circumstances, quote unquote, humble because they've not had the same opportunity as other people in life, or people who've been told to submit, whether because of their social location, or their race or their class or their gender or sexuality, because, I also think that humility is often like for the powerful, it can be a tool to reinscribe power. Like if you have a lot of power or wealth or influence, if you're like, oh, well, I'm a very meek and humble person. Like I'll give you an example. I was talking to a friend of mine who works with a bunch of doctors at a very prestigious hospital who have all these amazing degrees, and, and she and I were talking, she's like, oh, well, they'll never take credit. It's not like this other guy that we just met who is, like an agent for street artists and kept talking about himself and how great he was and how he makes things happen. I mean, this guy talked at us for 45 minutes about how great he was. And I'm like, well, yeah, but the doctor at this really prestigious hospital, like it's actually a benefit to their career to not take credit and to be super humble. But for this other guy who's talking about himself, like his whole monetary system is based on fame and and prestige as far as him talking himself up. So like for him, he's acting according to his industry and what's expected of him and what will get him ahead. They're both doing what will get them ahead. But for the people in a really high position of power, humility is actually a tool to keep them in power and to get respect. Whereas in another part of life, it is a detriment. So I think it's so contextual that I don't think we can have even a word for it. Like what, you know? So anyway,
So you're saying the like personal virtue of humility is illusory because it means so different from one case to the other that you can't even have that kind of virtue that floats above people and people try to ascribe to.
Yeah, and I would
contextual.
offer that it's really only a virtue if you get in really high positions of power. And you can be like, oh, look at me, I'm so humble. Like I don't have to brag about what I have.
Part of me says yes, part of me says hell no. Part of me says hell no. Because I've seen people who have literally no power. And I would, from the eyes of society and economically, they're so disempowered. But their humility, and I'm not talking about humility as far as power dynamics go, but their humbleness of spirit and like who they are gives them a certain sort of power in life. I mean, it's for some people, it's part of their identity, and you even if you have little, you can still be a humble person. Even if you're like seeking for social justice and calling out people who are in power, you can still be a humble person. I think that's why the definition's so muddy, maybe.
No, and I would offer that the very reason we have civil rights in the last century is because minority populations cast off humility and embrace pride. Gay pride, black pride. Like, it's not like humility, I think, is a tool of the colonizer to keep people down. I honestly do.
No
so
way.
We can agree to disagree.
Properly defined, humility is embracing other people's interests as much as or above your own.
But if you've been oppressed, that's really dangerous.
Yeah,
it's
but
Stockholm
if you're being oppressed, you look at the people around you who are oppressed and you put their and even if you're not oppressed, if you're let's say you're the 90% in a society that has a certain minority that's being oppressed, humility is the key to unlock your apathy and your disengaged world and to actually enter social justice and reform. I would say humility is a large driving force for some people to get into social justice that never would have in the first place.
But humility has a passive connotation to it for me. I mean, again, like this, we're coming from very opposite positions where like humility's been frustrating for me and it's been liberating for you. So again,
so you've been told, that's really, that's actually fascinating.
Right?
Yeah. It has been liberating for me because to embrace the true definition of humility means calling the powers to recognize people's interests who are not. But for you, you said it made you feel insecure or made you feel like you had to be insecure in the past.
I feel like humility is normative for, I can just talk from my own position,
sure,
as a female. I feel like humility is normative for women. And if you try to step outside of humility and act like a confident agent, you're not only looked at strangely, but you're actively often punished, a lot of times by other women who feel threatened by you stepping outside that box. And so if I were to stand up and say, hey, I'm good at this thing, I feel like there would be like significant weird social blowback for me to say that, so it's weird. It's a weird thing, but I have no problem saying, yes, I believe we should love our neighbors as ourselves. But for me, that starts with self-love and echoes outward instead of trying to uplift other people over ourselves. Because if we already have a really horrific concept of ourselves that we don't deserve good things in life, how can, and I think that's what
thoughts or the no thoughts of yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to what you were talking about a little bit earlier when you mentioned, gay pride and brown pride and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think part of the problem maybe is that we've juxtaposed humility too much to pride, where pride has a negative connotation and humility has a somewhat positive one, depending upon the place you're in, but that they're exclusive of one another, which I don't think so. I think part of what we would say true humility is being able to have a healthy pride in certain areas about where you are, and not ejecting that from humility altogether.
Yeah, surrendering your self-worth or your agency is not being humble. It's not.
Yeah, but it gets mixed up so easily.
I know, and I think anyone who promotes that is doing the very opposite thing of what being humble is. I mean, if humility really is recognizing other people's interests, to do that to yourself is creating a society and an atmosphere and a definition of humility that destroys people's interest and destroys people's personhood. So that should.
It's a tough one.
But if the word itself is so like slippery that way, then why and
use
this kind of
it?
goes back to why use it?
Because the virtue itself is still important. Like I
Then
said,
rename the virtue.
Why don't we call it right sizing or taking up the right kind of space or equality?
Because it means
equitability.
more,
Or self-aware.
more than that, though.
Self-awareness. Self-awareness, because you're allowing people to recognize both their limitations and strengths at the same time, and they don't have to conflict.
But it's also more than that. I think humility for me is because there's other connotations that get lost if you're going to talk about it as just like the right view of self. Humility is also living. This is something I struggle with personally. So I guess I could say it. I struggle to be humble in the sense that I struggle to live simply. I really do believe Christianity has built into it a call to live simply and to use our resources to make a just world and to not spend on myself more than anybody should ever spend on themselves, like in my life. That call to simplicity is a call to humility. And that gets lost when it's just about how I view myself. So
I don't know if you can necessarily link those two.
Yeah, because humble means lowly. It has
a
connotation of lowness.
Okay.
And so
James 1 says, let the believer who is lowly boast in being raised up. This is actually kind of cool because there is an exchange here. It's talking about the community as a whole. Let the believer who's lowly boast in being raised up, and let the rich in being brought low, because the rich will disappear like a flower in the field. And it goes on to talk about how the riches of the rich are passing and they're not something that you can put your faith in completely. And so there's this leveling effect of humility that raises the people who have no agency and brings down people who have more than their neighbor.
Is it leveling though, or is it just inverting hierarchy and sustaining hierarchy?
That to me, bringing down the high and bringing up the low is like a leveling kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but you talk about living simply as you think that's something we should do, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But there, I don't know. When we talk about this idea of humility, like why is it automatically the higher being brought down is the humble thing to do as opposed to raising up the lower? Like they're both ends to that. Like if I'm in a situation where I have means, it's not that I can't live unsimply, but how do I raise the level of people around me? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't know how I'm fully trying to articulate
You're saying embracing simplicity of life isn't necessarily raising people around you. And you're saying, why can't we all have like that raised sort of life instead of embracing simplicity?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think the connotation that I have a hard time with is that humility is always associated with low.
Yeah, I guess you could be a humble person with much. It's just, and I'll quote Jesus, way freaking harder.
Jesus said that, really?
Yeah, he did. It's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle.
Yeah, but rich is relative too.
Absolutely.
Like,
all of these terms are relative, but they're still important. I think
that's why I think maybe instead the conversation, like that word itself though, like throws a wrench in the works still for me. Like why don't we talk about it as love?
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about it as love? Like loving someone as yourself.
Because there has to be a biting tone to it. Honestly, if you talk about self-love and right view and stuff, for the people who are benefiting from systems that oppress people, it's never going to. In James 1, the rich person will be like, well, I just have what I have. And I love those other people.
I disagree, though, because
it's loving your neighbor as yourself.
Well, in Philippians, it talks about being like Christ, who gave of himself to benefit other people. It's
but that's connected to sacrificial language, and I don't know that you can necessarily apply that logic of speaking of Christ to humility and our day-to-day interactions.
Well, Paul does.
Or maybe you can only speak about Christ in terms of humility because it's God, an ultimate or an infinite, reducing God's self, right?
Yeah,
and
so us having access to that and us being made in the likeness of God and us entering the kingdom is participating in that work, is participating in realizing all of this world is owned by God, like every last drop, and we will not take more than we are due. We're not going to. I think a profound lack of humility has allowed our country to create the biggest inequality that's ever existed. We don't take away the unearned income of the top 1%. There are people in our country who make money every year. They don't earn 90% of what they make. There's no human being that, I just read an article. There's no person that works 1,000 times harder than a janitor.
And
right?
we also have
paid 1,000
starving
times.
people.
Yeah. And they get paid
time.
1,000 times more than a janitor. That's a profound lack of humility right there, that our society looks and says, well, that person just earned $23 million last year and that's it. No, they didn't. They didn't earn $23 million.
But when you say that's a lack of humility, like I think we all agree that that's egregious, and I don't think there's any disagreement in that area. But when we put the word humility to it, you say it has to be biting for someone to realize.
A society.
But if it's biting, then there's the other side of that coin where it can also make someone feel like they're not living up. And even if they don't have much, they need to have less. And it becomes that power struggle. So a biting word might be used for one side of the coin, but the other side of the coin, that's damaging.
True.
So
it's damaging to someone.
So I think I think it needs to be a virtue, though.
But only for powerful people is what I'm hearing you say.
But a virtue for a society. For individuals, people who are, especially Christians, who are trying to follow Jesus, I think it's an important personal ethic. But I think if you look at it from like the social perspective, it has to be a societal virtue, or you will create a society that does believe some people are owed more by the universe than others.
So you think that humility is kind of an antidote to entitlement and individualism that runs rampant? That's interesting. I mean, but here's the rub for me is that like movements like Occupy Wall Street have tried to publicly demand and outcry abuses of pride and a lack of humility. And it seems like there's even if we try to make it socially normative for humility to be expected and ethics to be expected, it still seems like it will never be that way. By the way, I said this off air, but I want to recommend to our listeners, if you have not seen the movie The Big Short, go see it immediately. It's amazing. I'd love to talk more to anyone who wants to talk about this.
She's wanting to see it for so long because there's all those awesome actors in there.
It's so good, but it's very pertinent to this conversation. Just how greed and power corrupts so easily. But I guess I'm wondering, is humility enough of an antidote? Like just telling people to be more virtuous? Because I feel like in my experience, telling people to
be virtuous is not enough.
It doesn't
to make
work.
Virtue. Yeah, that's
true. It doesn't work. There has to be some kind of enforcement, and you can't enforce virtue because it's a virtue, right? It's not. It can't be really legislated. So
as like a spirituality or an internal like moral ethic, it is something that needs to be a goal for like a spiritual community, for a church, or for even our own hearts. It needs to be an ideal that we move toward, or else we settle for whatever else we see in society, which ends up being, like you said, in that movie, or what we look at in our economy. Oh, it's just the way that it is. No, It's not. Like I do believe if you look at things from the perspective of God, from the whole, and you look at the life of Jesus, it calls all those things into question, and it creates a community that is humility is a big part of it. But I want to say all of that, but say that I do hear both of you that there is so much negative connotation to it that it can be very.
I wonder if it's less of a virtue and more of a byproduct of other virtues.
Okay, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I think if you're living a generous life and you're seeking to uplift those around you and not holding your wealth too tightly or your power too tightly,
or your interests
too tightly, you're gonna take up the right amount of space in the world, right? So, but I don't know. So this is what the personal story I was going to tell earlier. I have a really hard time personally with humility, because so there's humility that's like a frame of mind and heart, right? That will guide your positioning toward your interactions in the world. And then there's a humility that has to do with the actual actions of giving to somebody or something like that, or downsizing your life to be more equitable, right? So I guess I'm saying I'm talking more about the spiritualized, non-material side of humility, like the attitude and what I was talking about earlier, that I feel like I've been ethic. The way that I've been conditioned to see myself. So this has actually caused a lot of problems for me because I'm a performer, I'm a singer, and I've trained for many years to get, it's even hard for me to say to get good at it, but I'm good at it. And I feel this really strange, I have a really strange relationship with performing, because I feel like every time I perform, I'm like, ooh, look at me, everybody. And I think a lot of that's just growing up in church and only performing in church for so many years that it just feels fundamentally wrong to just perform for my own sake and to entertain, that I always because I was so conditioned to we worship Jesus when we perform. It's not about us, it's about God. And so I feel this really strange fear and panic when I perform that like I'm being prideful when I know that people enjoy it. And this is further complicated by the fact that I get sometimes thrown shade by people around me for being good at this. Like I feel like I have been resented by some people in the past, and that's, people have their own stuff to deal with, but like, I don't know. And I think about all these rappers who are like, I'm the best, I'm the greatest, or whatever. And, a lot of us roll our eyes at some of the things that they say, but also they can't. So there's a degree to which you can't really be an artist unless you have a big sense of self and a big ego.
Absolutely.
So
and to a lesser degree, that's how writing has been for me. To engage and write something and create something is to say, I have worth, or my perspective has worth, or what I'm doing has some sort of worth. And that's unfortunate. You said you felt you were conditioned to see yourself a certain way.
Yeah.
To have self-abnegation. That's, again, I don't think that's humility. When I look at like the New Testament, the things I've been talking about, it's an idea of self-giving, not you recognizing your worth is a part of being a healthy human being, is a part of being a healthy Christian. Like, I would say so much of what Jesus did was lifting people and giving them agency. That's like, and you standing up and be like, I'm a performer, I'm going to do what I'm good at. Like, recognizing your talents is the right view of yourself, right? But giving and engaging other people in a humble way is, I think it's a process too. Especially
maybe
if you're
that could
coming out
include
of
performance if you see it as giving a gift.
Yeah, but see, why do you have to say in a?
I just want to say one last thing. I know I'm taking up a lot of the conversation, but I do think it's a trajectory.
You should be more humble, Alan.
I've heard that before. You know what? Maybe I should share my things too, but I probably shouldn't because it's going to get ugly. Coming out of a background where you are conditioned to see yourself in a negative light, or at least being told you shouldn't be so full of yourself as to think you have anything to offer or something, or you shouldn't, performance shouldn't be about you. If that's your background, it's a trajectory to come out of it. Of course, you're going to have moments of insecurity and you feel like you're just being self-promotional. But I really do think as we mature, or at least as I am maturing spiritually, it becomes less and less of an issue. And the less of an issue it is for you, the less of an issue it becomes for other people. It just becomes what you do. I think that's like part of becoming an artist.
Well, I don't know. In passing, you said, you got to be able to express yourself in a humble way. But that phrase alone bothers me. Like, why can't you learn to express yourself in your way? Like, why? What is the difference between
I don't know.
those
Did I
two
say
things?
A humble way? I don't.
Yeah, I think you said that.
But I'm not attacking you. I'm just talking about like the rhetoric attached to this. Like, oh, that person's so humble. Like we use that term to describe these outward things, but like, what the hell's wrong with self-promotion? If you're freaking good at what you do, then do it well.
Self-promotion infringes on other people. I've seen I lived in LA for 4 years, and I can't tell you how many relationships were destroyed when someone became so utterly self-promotional. That was all, like, that was in ministry.
Yeah, but do you wonder if that's
like personal friendships and stuff? And I agree that there is such a need to promote yourself in certain industries, and that's fine. But I think once it begins to harm other people and their interests, that's when it would become.
But I wonder if that is a reaction to them growing up their whole lives being told that they're worthless, and then they finally figure out something that they're good at and they get praised for it, and they overindulge a little bit while they're trying to find balance.
Yeah, again, it's a process.
And there are those people, right, who are so out of touch that you're like, how in the world did you get this out of touch? Like,
because our society, I sound so conservative. I'm sorry, I sound so conservative. Because our society doesn't have traditional values and moral anymore. Nobody likes humility. Maybe that's what I'm starting to sound like. But I do think it.
Well, how about instead of humility, we say truthfulness? Like, okay, like you've seen those American Idol video reels with the people who go on there like, I'm a really good singer, and they cannot hold a tune, and everyone their whole life is like encourage them, and then they make an ass out of themselves on public television.
Wow.
Like they're.
What? I just realized
what
you just said. Like truth telling. I think being humble. Okay, this is the difference. But if you're just talking about artists, the difference for me is there is a certain type of artist that owns who they are completely. And the way they are in the world empowers other people. And there are certain artists who own who they are, and all they do is degrade and demoralize other people and prey upon them. And I think you as a person, like Jeff said, if humility is like kind of who you are as opposed to what you do, owning who you are should raise, to use Jeff's language again, raise the people up around you. Maybe that's right. Maybe that's the right way to look at it.
And
look at that American Idol situation is that you're talking about like someone who on one level they have so much pride in themselves even though they're way off, but the real lack of humility is an American Idol exploiting those people and putting them in a position to jump on
to
that,
not
you know
just
what I mean?
judge their voices. That's one side, but to go beyond that and
yeah. Here's where it gets really complicated for me because, okay, so if I walk out on a stage or if I walk into a room of people and I'm like, hey, does anyone want to hear a song? And I kind of like stand in the corner and like sing quietly. It's like perceived as socially awkward and weird. It could look like I'm fishing for compliments or that I'm completely insecure and unsure of myself. And people will react strangely to that. Whereas if on the far other side, I walk into a room and interrupt everyone's conversations like, I'm going to sing a song now and you cannot help but not listen to me, you know, that's also off-putting. But it's actually kind of strange. I've noticed that people are actually they become very comfortable with you and much more willing to engage and relax and enjoy the performance when you can offer the right amount of confidence, the right amount of confidence. And people expect that. And if you don't present the right amount of confidence,
you know what?
People get very weirded out about it.
That needs to be skewered and pinned to the wall for this conversation. Humility is not a lack of confidence. That needs to be said over and over again.
It's the right amount of confidence.
It's not a lack of confidence.
It's a well-informed confidence.
Yeah.
It's a truthful confidence. But
it's not Trump or Kanye West. It's like,
Okay, here's what I'm thinking, you guys, about this.
Yes.
As like a gauge. Maybe if you are rewarded socially for being humble and exhibiting humility, you should look at that. And if you're rewarded socially for not being humble, you should also look at that, right? Like maybe we should look at what is actually being reinforced in us and what we're being conditioned to be.
Yeah, you have to, especially with any internal ethic, you have to look at how you got there and who's benefiting from it for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. There's such a nebulous subject. I mean,
it is. Yeah.
Even my definition, I was like writing down some of the things I've been saying. They're all over the map.
Down with humility. Antiquated.
Up with humility. Up with correct humility. Embrace it. It will change your life. It will change your world.
We need a better word.
No,
I'm going to think about it.
We do need a better word.
We need a better word.
Man, again, I'm sounding very, very traditionalist. We need better people. Don't change my words.
We need a healthy self-awareness, I think.
A healthy self-awareness plus self-givingness plus living simply.
We need truth. We need truthfulness is what I'm going to say.
Plus recognizing our limitations.
Yeah. But that's all encompassed in self-aware. Like you're aware of your various contexts and how to respond.
But that means your point of reference is yourself, though, Jeff, don't you think?
But what's wrong with that?
First of all, I was about to say, you can be very self-aware and be a narcissist. Did you know that?
True.
Have you guys heard about the narcissist test? You know, the only narcissist test that actually proves someone's a narcissist, it's one question long.
Let's take it right now. Okay, yeah, tell us.
One question long.
I want to know.
Are you a narcissist?
And if you say no, then you are one?
No, if you say no, you're not. They say that, well, okay, there are some unaware narcissists. So if you say no, there's possibility you still are. But they say narcissists, all by and large, will admit that they are. It's crazy.
Yeah, but they also will admit that that's because they're the exception and that all the narcissism is actually true.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, it's false. Yeah. But that's not self-awareness. Like I think true humility absolutely starts with yourself. If you aren't starting there, then, we talk all the time. Like Mona mentioned it before, love your neighbor as yourself. Like that qualification of the link between how you view and take care of yourself and how you view others is always there. And you're going to treat others based on how you treat yourself internally. Maybe not on a consistent basis, but eventually it could bubble up or whatever.
Yes.
Like those two things are so intimately linked that to say that you shouldn't look inward to yourself first, I think, first of all, is impossible.
I don't think anyone's making that. I don't think anyone's making that.
No, but don't
claim.
we have like such a self-obsessed selfie culture that everyone's looking at themselves too much, and that's not helpful?
Sort of.
That's literally looking at yourself. I'm saying like
introspection,
and I think that's a problem. I think that maybe the selfie culture is a result of too much what we would call humility and using that word in such ways that put people in a place where
it could be a corrective against humility. I saw this really cool mural in Miami recently. It was Narcissus, right? The legend of Narcissus, who stares at himself in the pond.
Yep.
But instead of his accurate reflection, it was like this gobbledygook monster reflecting back in the water, but he was still obsessed with it. I thought that was fascinating. We'll have to post a picture of it.
That's cool.
And part of that problem too is that the voices that we have, like there's always going to be someone that tells us that we're wrong or that we're doing this, but there's a difference between our trusted confidant and, a comment on a YouTube video. And if we're taking in those voices as equal, then that has to be something we change with ourselves. We can't change it with anyone else. So I absolutely think, and we talk about the selfie generation. I mean, it's a generation. And I would say more than anything, we should look at how we've treated that generation. And it makes perfectly sense on why they're so quote unquote obsessed. And we talked about this in our adolescence thing, but that's just a reaction to try to get, I think, a generation to get their voice out there when the rest of the other generations are telling them that they're selfish and they're this or whatever. Like
it could be a sign of disenfranchisement, actually.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
I do want to say though that all of that I'm up to speed with you guys, but a moral compass can only point the right direction and can't ever make you go there. I really think like introspection and right view of self is the key fundamental element of humility, but you don't get to humility or to the spiritual virtue that was taught by Jesus by just knowing yourself. Know thyself is the first battle. Right. Giving thyself is the second. Actually creating a world that is better because of your presence in it and because you're lifting up other people and you're concerned for their interests only happens when you embrace an internal ethic of humility.
So you think self-awareness and humility is the difference between knowledge and wisdom?
Yeah, basically.
Giving yourself, and I'm going to talk a lot more about this when we do our atonement episode soon, but giving yourself
you said it, so it's going to happen.
Giving of yourself. I know we've been fighting about that for a long time. But when you say giving yourself is the second component, you have to remember that millions and maybe billions of people on this earth have been dismembered in many different ways. They have been forced to give themselves. And so I think we have to remember to frame. We have to remember to frame what is being asked of people and how much suffering there has existed because of those teachings,
Yeah, only once you actually own yourself can you give. Or once you're finally confident in who you are or whatever, or you have agency, can you embrace humility? Otherwise, if it's being forced on you, that's not true, that's not true humility. That's oppression.
All right. Well, I think we're dangerously close to running into a logical loop over and over again in some of our conversation.
This is good stuff. I love it.
I agree. So let's kind of close out with some takeaways. Alan, why don't you start?
I like what Mona said. Humility is not a lack of confidence. I really like that. That's a really helpful corrective. And I think that we have to remember that coming out of poor definitions of humility is like coming to the promised land, right? That's the spiritual journey that we need to do, is move out of these unhealthy ways of viewing it so that we can embrace true humility, which is correct thoughts of ourselves, correct thoughts of others, but also considering their interests as equal as ours or over and above. Giving of ourselves and serving their interests are important once we have a good view of ourselves. So that's the way of Jesus, living simply. And I think that that's what we need to embrace to protect individuals in our society and to protect our society as a whole. And it's just good moral hygiene. Look at me. That's disgusting. Oh my gosh. I'm going to look at this in like 10 years and be like, wow, that kid was intense. He was dealing with some tough stuff.
We all are, man. We all are. Okay. So, Jeff, do you want to go next?
No, go ahead.
So for me, as I've mentioned, humility has been really problematic. And coming from someone who's so insecure, you might never believe this, but when I was a high schooler, I would get so afraid of social interactions that, like, if I was in a group of people and I would start talking and everyone would, you know how in the room, like, someone starts talking and everyone kind of gets quiet to hear what they have to say. If that happened and I all of a sudden had a bunch of pairs of eyes looking at me, I would start stuttering. Like I would develop a socially paranoid stutter. I'm fortunately not that girl anymore.
I never would have guessed that because I never saw you in those situations.
I was weird. For a long time, but through college, I was very, very insecure and very afraid all the time and lacked a lot of confidence. So for me, humility, screw it. I don't need it. But when I grasped this concept the concept of space, that you have a right to take up an equal amount of space as other people in the room or in the world. And that space will ebb and flow. Sometimes it's appropriate to take up a little bit more space and stand your ground or exert yourself or perform or say you're good at something and be seen. Sometimes that's right. But other times that space will flux and it's right for you to take up less space and make up more space, like make more room for other people and go out of your way to make more room for other people. So for me, it's not about sacrifice or giving. It's about finding the golden space ratio of like what I'm supposed to occupy in that moment and being aware that that'll change day to day, situation to situation, but that it's okay for me to take up space, because a lot of us are raised to believe that we should be invisible and we should be small all the time. And that's our norm. So for me, it's really healing to think about like, yeah, I have a freaking right to take up some space here. That's my birthright as a human being in the world.
I love that.
That's good.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
And I would say that in the end, we need a new word, because the word that we have for humility is more associated with insecurity and codependence than anything else. And it's time for us to reform something greater and bigger and
bigger and better.
I don't like H words anyway. So
you don't like H words?
I just wanted to say that. I don't know why.
Huh. That's really
Anyway.
Interesting.
So let us know what you think. If you have anything to add to this conversation, you can comment on the show notes at irenicast.com/55. That's irenicast.com/55. And anytime you want to communicate with the show, unrelated to the specific topic, you can do that at irenicast.com/feedback. We always welcome your question, comments, and concerns for the show. So on the other side of the music, we are going to be bringing in a new segment called Title Me This. Title Me This. This is kind of the reverse version of our segment called Judge a Book by Its Cover, where instead of giving a title and then the other person has to guess the synopsis, we are going to come with the synopsis for, in this case, Christian romance novels.
Oh, God,
and
I'm
from
so excited.
from the description, the other host will have to guess the title.
Can I tack on a rule to this game, though?
Yes.
You have to read the description like you are trying to get people to read the book. So you have to read it earnestly.
Very nice. Earnestly.
Well, I was thinking we should have someone that can do
descriptions.
a parody of that guy that does all the trailers in the 90s.
Well, I can't. My
world.
voice won't do that, but I will.
No, you have to read it earnestly. You have to actually believe what you're saying when you're saying it. Just suspend your disbelief.
All
for a
right,
moment.
suspend our disbelief.
First of all, we started researching for this, and I think it was Bona or Jeff said that this is probably bad for their soul.
Jeff said that,
That
and
was
I said
me.
this is so misogynistic.
And I seriously,
paternalistic.
and I also said that every one of these synopsis I feel like could be on the back, are all ready for production for like Kirk Cameron's movie career. Like,
Yeah.
He's
And then
just
Alan and I
waiting
both
to
admitted that we
discover.
had both read Christian romance novels in our younger days.
Okay, we do have to own that, don't we?
I have to. I'm owning it.
Oh man, when I was maybe a sophomore in high school, I read some D. Henderson novels, and the one I just looked up to tell them to what I had read is called The Rescuer, and I'm pretty sure it's about an EMT or a fireman who like literally rescues a burn victim by coming into her life and making everything right.
wow.
Oh boy.
Well, in
All
all
right.
humility, I take pride in the fact that I never read one of these awful novels.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, who's going to go first?
Can
You guys, these people are just taking up their space. How dare you criticize them?
No,
That's messed
we
up.
can still call out Bullpucky when we see it. Come on.
Again, I'm not
But you
criticizing
can't
them,
say-
but I'm criticizing their work heavily.
Very nice. We are not saying these are bad people.
It's not their
just
fault
this-
they think this is
that's
good
right.
taste.
It's their false humility.
Oh my god. Okay,
Oh, this
here we
is
go.
devolving. Okay, can I
I
go
want to go
first?
first.
Okay, go
I
ahead,
wanna-
Alan. Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. This 15,000 word novelette contains powerful Christian influences, love, family, and other related themes meant to make you smile. Blank is a wonderful Christian Western romance story about love. It takes place in the mid 1800s on a large ranch in Colorado owned by a bitter man. Roger lost his wife and children unexpectedly several years before and can't seem to get over his depression. He blames God for his loss and has developed an impenetrable wall around his heart. He owns and maintains a ranch by himself and feels that it is time to move on and find someone to grow old with. He places an advertisement seeking a good Christian bride. Lucy, beautiful and loving, feels led by God to respond to the cowboy's ad in hopes of bringing joy and love to this troubled man's heart.
I have a feeling that you found a similar book to what I found.
Actually, everything I read is exactly.
Is this part of the Mail Order Bride series?
Oh no, we found the same thing because I dug deep.
I found a
crazy.
different part of the series.
Mail Order Bride.
Yes.
Wait, this is a series?
Yes.
Mail Order
I didn't know
Bride?
it was a series.
Yeah.
Now tell me. Now tell me the last half of the title.
Yeah. Okay. The second half of the title: Desperate for
guess.
Affection, Finding the Love of Christ Through the Mail.
Sleepless in Susan.
No, it is
Aging Gracefully. Oh. No.
Ooh, that's pretty good.
Thanks.
Ranch Hand.
This is how it's going to be the whole time.
This is
I didn't know I'm
fantastic.
walking into this.
This is
Oh, no.
fantastic.
No, it is actually
Okay.
Fixing Her Cowboy's Broken Heart.
Oh.
Fixing Her Cowboy's Broken Heart.
That's
So it's
not
a
even
little-
like catchy. Fixing, yeah. of
No, it's
course.
not. It's very descriptive. Like,
Okay.
I like it. That's
All right. Can I do the Mail Order Bride Part 2? Because this is another
Yes,
one of the
please.
series.
Yes.
Okay, but you have to
Yes.
guess the second half of the title.
Okay.
Okay. Ready? Left destitute and alone with her mother and her father after her father abandoned them. Erin is shocked when she learns that her mother has arranged for her to be a mail order bride to Mr. Rich McNettle. But they are out of money and their marriage is their last chance for a stable life. So Erin agrees to travel west to wed this man she's never met. But when a stagecoach accident and a brave man step into her destiny, she believes that God has other plans for her. Half white man and half I'm having a hard time reading this earnestly. Paiute, John Green is used to being shunned as an outcast. So when he meets lovely Erin on the coach headed west, he is shocked that she doesn't turn away from him. And after he saves her from a terrible accident, he is even more shocked to learn that he is beginning to love her. But Erin is engaged to be married to a man in town, the same man that hates John with all his heart.
my goodness. I got the perfect title for this.
Okay.
Colonial Fever.
I was going to say The Riches of Christ or something.
Oh my
Because
God.
she's going to go with the... Man, that's interesting.
I have to say this title
Those
is
are the
so
worst
awkward.
character names ever, by the way.
Mr.
Like, you might as well
Rich
call the guy
McNettle.
Richie Rich.
And Aaron Sadler is the main character in a Western novel. Okay,
Sadly.
Listen.
So let's call it I don't know. Something with that's the best love triangle I've ever heard.
it's
They
good.
hate each other.
This is
He's rich.
This is
the other guy's like a
quality
half-white
conflict.
person. Mhm.
I'm really sorry to our listeners.
Colonialism down or something.
No,
Like,
okay, you're not. This title is so awkward that you're not going to guess it. The surprise bride saved by the heartbroken Indian.
No freaking way.
Yes!
You
No,
said
that's
the other
not
one was
true.
descriptive.
Isn't
That's
that really
even way
freaking
more
awful?
descriptive.
It's so bad. Oh my god.
That's a paragraph. That's not a title. All right. Here's mine. An unthinkable danger. An unexpected choice. Annabelle, once the daughter of a wealthy merchant, is trapped in indentured servanthood to Lord Randolph,
Ooh.
a recluse who's rumored to be both terrifying and beastly. Her circumstances are made even worse by the proximity of Lord Randolph's bailiff, a revolting man who has unwelcome advances on Annabelle in the past.
Ooh.
Believing that the life in a nunnery is the best way to escape the escalation of the bailiff's vile behavior,
Ooh.
and to preserve the faith that sustains her, Annabelle is surprised to discover a sense of security and joy in her encounters with Lord Randolph. As Annabelle struggles to confront her feelings, she's involved in a situation that could place Randolph in grave danger. Randolph's future Randolph's future and possibly his heart may rest in her hands, and Annabelle must decide whether to follow the plans she has cherished or the calling God has placed in her heart.
Oh my god.
I'm going to say 50 Shades of Grace.
Oh my goodness.
He's a rich dude, right? That this poor little indentured servant's going to
Oh
save
my
his life by being his servant. Wonderful.
Lord for the Lord.
Lord.
None too soon. Get it?
Yeah, we get it.
She's going to be a nun.
I feel like if they put as much like effort into the titles of these as they did like the grandiose scenarios, that they'd be much better off.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god!
But here's the title. Are you ready?
What's the title?
The title is The Merchant's Daughter.
Oh, that's it. See, this is like, you're right. It's building a really big patio for a small house. That's sad. All right, I have another one.
Okay.
Are we going to continue doing
Yes,
this?
please.
Or is this too much?
Yeah, one more each.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Maura's parents got a divorce when she was 8, and she hasn't seen or spoken to her dad for 17 years. When she inherits her grandparents' cabin in the mountains of North Carolina,
Ooh.
she is shocked and curious. She persuades Paige, her mother, that they should go and stay in the cabin for a few days before they list it for sale. Jason is a carpenter by trade, but he's
like
willing
Jesus.
to help a friend by exterminating Maura's house. She persuades to get him to give the ladybugs a reprieve, and by time they part, each is trying to think of a good excuse to contact the other. Ooh. Paige realizes that Maura and Jason are falling in love and does her best to discourage the relationship. When Maura insists on remaining in North Carolina, Paige flies back to Missouri without her. No one predicted that Maura's father would show up. The story he tells doesn't match facts with the story Paige has told, and Maura is convinced that neither of her parents deserve her forgiveness. And I'm going to stop reading there because I think it's the whole plot.
Oh my
in
goodness!
this description.
Wait, what? Who has a ladybug infestation? And how are carpenters exterminating bugs?
This is the last line. According to Jason, that's the carpenter, that's why it's called Grace.
Oh wow!
Awesome.
Killing.
I'm
God's
very
creatures.
confused.
Yeah, I'm
So
so
basically,
lost.
she goes to the cabin, meets the carpenter, gets really pissed at her parents because they're in love, her and the carpenter, and then the carpenter teaches her to forgive her parents because it's all about grace.
Oh my god! There's always somebody rescuing somebody else in these stories.
Yep.
Every
Or
single
teaching.
time.
I like it when a man can teach a woman how to
Oh my god! I'm gonna
be
punch
in the
you.
world.
I'm gonna punch you so hard.
My wife is the piece of coal and I'm the chisel, and if I could just chisel away at her till she's a beautiful diamond.
That's
like,
not
I
how
can make
diamonds
her-
are made. You're not even using good metaphors to be misogynistic
Whatever.
right now.
Chisel the coal away from the diamond that's inside.
Okay, what the
Look at
heck
me.
is this?
I know what I'm talking about.
That's not how it works.
All right, name it. Title me this.
Cabin of Grace. Cabin in the woods of freedom in Christ.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to say parental unit.
You're way too freaking good at this. Unit has so many connotations. Like, oh, she inherited this unit, this cabin.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah, dude, that's
you have
hilarious.
a man embracing a woman on the cover and you say parental unit. People are going to open that up. They want to know what's going on.
I'm kind of lost right now.
There's like 3 or 4 definitions of that, Jeff. That's hilarious, dude. That's layered.
Inheriting
It's like
God's
an onion.
love.
Okay, no.
No. Okay, tell
No,
us.
no.
What is it?
It is Rescuing Ladybugs, a Christian romance.
Oh my goodness.
That came out of nowhere, huh?
That is actually a little
I
bit
knew
more
the
clever of
ladybugs
a
were
title than the other
crucial.
ones.
Jeff, look at Jeff. He's actually like, he's like, I like this one. I like
Rescuing
It's better. I'm
ladybug.
saying it's better than the other titles.
But don't they kill the ladybugs?
She persuades him to give them some respite, remember?
Some respite.
Reprieve.
So
A
just stop
reprieve.
killing them for a while?
It's a ladybug metaphor for her
Yeah.
heart, right?
I didn't know that ladybug. I think you were the one that was bringing it up, Mona. I don't know ladybugs can be an infestation in someone's
infest.
house.
I'm not sure
think so
that
either.
has ever happened, but maybe
buy a
someone will
couple
write
geckos
into us
and
and be
they'll be
like,
gone.
my house
Hey,
was
when you
infested
have
by
a good
ladybugs
metaphor,
and
you're going to
knocked
force it in there or not.
Ew,
She's
Jeff.
a ladybug, and the carpenter is going to save her when he thought he was going to be taking care of the
my God.
ladybugs. Took care of the lady's heart
With his parental unit.
with his parental unit. Oh my god, this is too much.
Give it up, guys. The jigsaw is up.
Oh, okay, that's enough.
All right.
Who's next?
Who is this? Is it me? Is
I'm
this the
next.
last one?
I'm next.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Lindsay Hamilton has watched as people around her have fallen in love and gotten married. She knows she needs a change in her life, but she also knows it doesn't involve romance or love, let alone marriage. When their church announces a 2-week missions trip to the Philippines, Lindsay feels that this may be the change she needs. Plus, it will give her the opportunity to see the world beyond the one she lived in her whole life. The only problem is her mother. Having almost lost one child, Lindsay's mother is distraught at the thought of her only daughter trekking halfway around the world by herself. In order to give her mother peace of mind, Lindsay agrees to allow a bodyguard to accompany her. Than Miller is the consummate ladies' man. He loves to spend time with them and make them feel good about themselves. Unfortunately, that very approach to life has made the one woman he's most interested in hold him at arm's length. When her older brother comes to his security company to hire a bodyguard for a trip she's taking, Than quickly agrees. Surely he'll have the opportunity to convince Lindsay to change her opinion of him during their trip together. Usually, Than has no trouble keeping his emotions detached from his job, but this time around, he's finding it more and more difficult. And it's not just because he's responsible for Lindsay. In the midst of the disaster, he comes face to face with a faith he's never experienced before. Will he give his heart to God, even as he waits for Lindsay to give hers to him? That's the summary.
Oh my goodness. All right, I got a title for this one.
Okay.
The Codependent Missionary.
Oh my God, you guys, the cover is so good too. It's like this like suave guy in a purple shirt and a tie staring like eagerly into the camera.
I'm going to say creepy chaperone.
Okay.
That's mine.
It's called Guarding Her Heart.
Yeah!
Oh my goodness.
That was the easiest one.
I know.
Dang it.
It's
I thought I'd
clever.
be good at
It's
this game.
clever. He's a
I'd
security
be
guard.
good.
He's guarding her heart.
I like it.
But she's really the one who has to guard her own heart.
All right, you ready for the last one?
Yeah.
A story of love that won't let go, no matter what. California's gold country, 1850. A time when men sold their souls for a bag of gold and women sold their bodies for a place to sleep.
Ooh.
Oh.
Ooh, you right?
Cool.
Angel expects nothing. Okay. Angel expects nothing from men but betrayal. Sold into prostitution as a child, she survives by keeping her hatred alive.
You guys, I've read
And what
this book.
No.
I
And what she hates
swear.
the most are the men who use her, leaving her empty and dead inside. But her unexpected softening. Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. But
Oh, no. How did you find this book out of all of them?
all right, here we go. But her unexpected softening comes with overwhelming feelings of unworthiness and fear. And so Angel runs back to the darkness, away from her husband's pursuing love, terrified of the truth she no longer can deny. Her final healing must come from the one who loves her even more than Michael, the one who will never let her go.
Okay,
You
I have
have
to
read
say,
this?
I have read
For real?
this. And I have to say, this book actually is not terrible literature. It's actually kind of written well. I have a lot of problems with it theologically, but like...
Wait, how have you read this?
What are the
That's crazy.
chances that
What are
you've
the
read
chances?
this?
Because this is
Well,
like one of the
wait, you've
best-selling
read a
Christian
lot.
romance novels of all time. and it's
Oh,
written by a
okay.
really famous author in that
So
world.
don't guess the
I found it on my parents' shelf, my parental unit shelf at one point, and I was like, what is this? This looks interesting. And I read it. So I won't say what the title is, but I do know what the title is. Go ahead,
Oh
Alan.
my
You want to
gosh.
guess?
Okay. I'm trying not to come up with a title that's not too scandalous because of what Jeff just did.
No, go scandalous. That's the best
I
way.
can't.
That's what makes this game fun.
The softening.
That's exactly what I was thinking. You just pulled it out of my mind. That's what it was. Oh my gosh. I was gonna.
It's the story of Hagar, actually.
I was gonna say Gold Crush.
Gold Crush. It's a retelling of the story of Gomer and Hosea.
Oh, Gomer and Hosea. That's what I meant
Yeah.
to say. Yeah.
So, and they cleverly named the husband Michael Hosea, in case you couldn't make the connection
In
before.
In case you didn't pick it up. Yeah.
I know. All right. So is that your answer, Alan? What
Gold,
Mona said
Gold
for you?
Crush, not the
Gold
softening.
Crush.
No,
I
Gold
like-
Crush.
It's redeeming love.
Redeeming love.
Redeeming love.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right, well, that will do it for us this week. If you enjoy what you hear and you want to support the show, you can go to irenicast.com/support, and there you'll see all the ways you can show your appreciation for the show, including rating, reviewing, and subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. So for this week, I'm Jeff.
I'm Mona.
And I'm Alan.
Thanks for joining the conversation. All right, that was an interesting. We'll see how that comes together.
My reading list just expanded. We're done.
I'm still recording.
I am too. I'm going to stop it right now.
Okay.
All right, go
1,
ahead.
2, 3.